staying there?
I'm conserving my energy.
Oh. Well, I was wondering if you were going to sit down and get back up again. Item 10 is a public hearing, the consideration of stormwater fee increase. Number one is resolution revising stormwater rates pursuant to section 14-703 of the Gastonia City Code and the North Carolina General Statute, section 160A-314. Number two is the ordinance amending section 14-714 of the Gastonia City Code, amount of funding from stormwater utility funds. I do move that the public hearing be open and call on Mr. Rusty Boss, city engineer.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Item 10.
The utility committee and then through its report to the city council, recently made some modifications to the off right-of-way programs that the city has to offer. One of those was requiring participation by the owners. The other was to create a method where we would reimburse the owner for the construction. This was aimed at trying to expedite the projects a little quicker than what we're getting to right now. And the third was that they confirmed the city's financial participation based on prioritization by the Stormwater Commission. The other thing that the city utility committee did during that meeting that brought to the council was a recommendation to consider a fee increase from $2.75 per month per ERU to $3.25 per month. That's a 50 cents increase per month based off of the ERU. The stormwater fees collected by the city currently go to a lot of different uses. I'm going to throw a pie chart up here. This is the same pie chart that's
We have.
One of the things that the committee recommended was that if there were an increase in the stormwater fee, that those funds be directed towards projects, specific projects and not administrative costs. The administrative costs essentially would be these two areas up here. The rest of these is essentially the projects, the field work that goes on managing and maintaining our stormwater system. Staff also created a chart that showed what incremental fee increase would look like as far as revenue towards the city. The top one is $4.25. It would total up to about $200,000 per year for the city. The 50 cents would total up to about $400,000. Essentially increments of $200,000, just big round numbers per year. So that's sort of the revenue that we're looking at that would be dedicated strictly towards the project. Staff also is able to touch with other municipalities in the region, some that are more comparable with our size. And again, this is the package or the tabulation that's in your agenda package. And those are essentially the monthly fees that we're seeing based off of other municipalities. And you can see they range anywhere from no fee all the way to Charlotte-Mecklenburg of over $9 per month, and everything in between. But that's a good way to a good barometer of where we stand with our other communities. Then we also wanted to take a look at what an impact of that recommended 50-cent increase would mean towards actual businesses here in Gastonia. So we took, again, this is another chart that's in the package. We took sort of some randomly selected parcels around the city. We tried to include very large as well as very small, and take a look at what the new monthly fee would be and the incremental change in those fees. At the very bottom is the residential unit, and you see essentially it's that 50-cent increase per ERU. So that would be applied to all of the residential businesses. All of the residents. The rest of, we also included City Hall. You see an increase there of $5.12 per month, all the way up to the First United Methodist Church here in downtown, and Ashbrook High School. We wanted to include a school in there also, so we kind of get a very broad picture of how much these increases go. The column on the far right is the monthly increase that these entities would be billed. The committee also asked staff, and this was a new thing that came out of the committee. This wasn't part of the committee presentation. Committee asked staff to look at different billing options, different ways to assess the fee and collect it. We looked at 3 options, or actually 4. Most communities in North Carolina use the ERU method that we use, where you establish an average rate for residents. All the residents get charged that rate, and then that ERU turns into how is used to calculate impervious surface on commercial or non-residential structures. So essentially, it's a pretty level playing field across the board for everybody. Government entities, businesses, residences, everybody's sort of a level playing field. We also looked at using a flat rate. This is done in just under 5%, or I'm sorry, just over 5% of the municipalities that we were able to sample in the state. And essentially, this method is everybody pays the same. Walmart would pay the same as resident John Doe, flat rate across the city. There's a tiered method whereby, based off of the imperviousness of the property, you pay different rates that are tiered out. There's found a typical one would be a 2,000 square foot break would be $3 a month. 2,000 to 3,000 would be $4 a month, and 3,000 above would be $5 a month. Again, this applies to regardless of residential or the type of use of the property. One of the other ones that we looked at was differential rates between residential and non-residential customers. The city of Archdale is the only one in the state that uses this method. And essentially, it's a flat rate for residences and then a calculation based off the impervious surface for non-residential. When staff looked at this and we looked at the workload involved, we looked at the amount of effort that would have to go into changing these rates and all the calculations that would have to be involved, and looking at what everybody else in the state is doing, we kind of came back to the recommendation that we stay with the ERU method that we have in place right now. That seems to be the most efficient, the most fair, and the most commonly used rate. It's what's expected in utilities. With that being said, after all of the work and all the information provided, staff recommends that we keep in place the current ERU-based fee structure. Staff recommends that consideration for a fee increase from $275 to $325 go into effect on July 1st of 2014. That coincides with the new fiscal budget year. One of the big drivers there on that one was that we didn't want to put something in place too soon that other people hadn't had a chance to budget for, specifically schools, anybody else that's on the same kind of fiscal calendar that we are, that didn't have any money set aside for a fee increase. I think the July 1st, 2014 allows for us to plan a little better. Staff also recommends that if the increase is approved, that the attached resolution to increase the stormwater fee also be adopted. And when we originally set up the city's stormwater ordinance, there was a statement in it that divvied up how much money by ordinance had to go into off-right-of-way program, how much money had to go into maintenance of the public work and the infrastructure of the right-of-way. That has become kind of a brick wall that we run into sometimes, and staff is asking that some flexibility be added to that, and that the word shall be changed to should in the ordinance. And that's included on the attached resolution also. That, I think that'll give us a little bit more flexibility when we're dealing with these projects, and sometimes a little bit of money needs to shift to accomplish a project from year to year. With that being said, I would be glad to try and answer any questions anybody has. I know this is a long topic, that we've gone over several times.
Elder?
Rusty, you're asking for a 50-cent increase on this, and that would equal for residents $6 per year.
Yes.
Also, the $400,000 that this would generate, would this go to increasing staff?
No, sir.
Or increasing Is it just for projects themselves that
The-
are listed here?
The recommendation from the utility committee would be that that increase be specifically directed into the capital improvement budget for projects. So it would go for materials that staff may build the project. We may not necessarily contract it out. It may be something that city forces build, but we would purchase the pipe or the seating or the erosion control stuff that goes with it. Or it would be to a contractor, it could be to some professional services for some testing associated with a project. But it would be directed towards a specific project. It would be about fixing problems out in the field and not additional staff, not additional administrative costs.
Now, this is fixing problems that are off the right-of-way
Or on the right of way.
or on the
It
right-of-way.
was not specified in the utility committee. And I think staffs would say that flexibility would be important.
Now, I counted that we have 80 projects that are here,
Yes, sir.
and you ranked them according, ones are priorities, twos or threes.
Staff generally ranks the projects that are inside the right-of-way, the maintenance of those projects. Projects that are off right-of-way go before the city's Stormwater Commission, which is a citizen panel appointed by this body, and they place prioritization on those projects as a category 1, 2, or 3, with 1 being the most critical projects. And this is for projects in people's yards. And then funding is basically first come, first served in those subcategories.
And there should be another project listed as the unknown, because every year or periodically, all of a sudden, there's something that's not even on the list, and it fails. And if it's in our right-of-way, we have to deal with it, and it automatically jumps in and competes for the money. So that's another thing, and we've had a few of those this year where you actually have a sinkhole, you have something like that going on your street. And so therefore, that's always there with stormwater.
So
That
this-
project down on Second Avenue, right behind Covenant Church,
Yes,
was a surprise. You had to spend all.
that was a big surprise, and that bled over into the stormwater, or the sewer also. There were a lot of different things happening in one spot. Yes, sir.
Surprise.
Very big.
Yes, sir, Mr. Kimball.
Thank you, sir. Rusty, with regard to the approximately 84 projects that you've identified here, with the 50-cent per ERU fee increase, would there be what would be the acceleration in turnaround time to complete these existing projects? Because I see here you have obviously you have your median is about 6 years on the project. What could we expect with that?
All right, this is big, broad, generalized
Sure.
paintbrushes. Because with whatever I'm gonna tell you, there's an exception to that rule
course.
somewhere that's gonna hit us. Right now, our capital budget every year is around 380,000. What we're talking about is 400,000 in addition to that 380,000 every year. So we'll have twice as much money every year going into the capital improvement projects. So theoretically, we could see twice as many projects, theoretically. Devil gets into details. Some of these projects are gonna have very differing costs. You could find some projects that eat an entire year's budget in just 1 or 2 projects. So I hate to throw a number out there without a whole lot of caveats around it.
Okay. Let me rephrase then. Would you feel comfortable that there would be an acceleration on the project list with this increase?
Yes, sir.
That's all I have. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Craig?
Rusty, we currently, if I'm reading this right, we currently bring in $2.1 million.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And of that $2.1 million, how much of that is spent on road right-of-ways?
The best answer to that is going to be on the pie chart.
Okay, I see that, that's
The
right.
red section, the 32%,
Uh-huh.
that's our road right of way, that's our major culverts.
You take 32% of 2.1 million.
So 32% of that 2.1 million, so that's.
672,000.
Okay, okay. So,
Thank you.
so that 32% of the 2.1 million currently is being spent on that, all right? Is that 32% pretty accurate year over year over year, or does that fluctuate a whole bunch?
It definitely fluctuates. I haven't looked at the previous years. That was just last year's numbers.
So we don't really know what the average might be?
I don't have, we can find that out. That's an easy number to get and track that. I just don't have that listed.
Well, what I'm getting at, okay, is if we're gonna increase to $3.25, and that's gonna generate close to $400,000, which is gonna about double what we spend on right-of-ways,
What we
Yeah.
spend on capital projects.
capital projects.
I should clarify, the public needs also goes to like maintenance of the stormwater equipment, backhoes, and the trucks that go out in the field. It's not all specific to the project itself, there's also other costs associated with it that aren't really administrative costs, but they're definitely costs towards the stormwater.
Okay. I guess what I am trying to ascertain is if we've got $400,000 more, then it goes back to what Councilman Kimball was saying. Right now, if we're doing 4 projects on the money that we have currently, then should we expect 8 projects done? If we increase it?
Numbers of projects are hard to throw, but yes.
I know,
To give a very simplified answer, yes. That's what we're anticipating. Right now, we have our CIP, our programming of stormwater money goes out 5 years in advance. Right now, we are programming, for instance, in fiscal year 14-15, we're programming one project to receive $230,000. Now this is in the right of way. So
It's in the right-of-way.
This is on the right of way. This is public needs type
Right.
project. One project is going to receive $230,000. So you can see where one project may eat the majority of that money in a hurry. Conversely, we may turn around, we may end up spending that money on 15 different projects that are just smaller in nature.
Well, I struggle, where my struggle is that there's some projects on here, on these 84, that have been on this list 8, 9 years.
Yes.
And how do we, I know how we justify, but how do we accommodate their needs in a better, faster way?
I think there are 2 things that we're talking about that are going to directly impact that. The first one's already been done, and that is allowing for a reimbursement program, where we allow the property owner to hire an engineer of their choosing, to do their design on their schedule, and then hire a contractor to do the construction on their schedule, and we simply reimburse them for that. Right now, we have a pretty finite staff, and we have the GEO bond projects going on, so you're always managing workload. So if the property owner will take some of that workload off, these things could happen a lot quicker. You may have somebody who's 51st on the list, may not be a very high priority project, but they just want it done, and they can get to it a lot quicker than we can. So allowing that reimbursement program to be in place, and that should help in some of those instances. The other one is simply money. If we had more money, we could get more projects out the door.
Well, and that answers my question, basically. By doing this, and by modifying the procedures that we did have in place, okay, gives us the opportunity to accelerate some of these that have been on this list for 8 or 9 years, if it's off of the right-of-way,
Yes.
and the property owner wants to partner with the city in some way to be able to get that done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. McAleer.
Yeah, several things. before you had the stormwater fix, the feds told us we had to do something. Before you had that, we were still doing a lot of this work. Right away, culverts, all that sort of thing. Where'd you get the money to do it then?
At that time, it probably came from two different sources. I may let the manager answer that, but I believe Powell bill and general fund were probably the two major.
So
Yeah,
it's part of the taxes.
General fund, your basic taxes paid for it. We have, as Rusty said, Powell bill to some extent, but it's basically your general fund. We didn't do anything off right away except for the old agreement, which we still have, that if you agree to buy the pipe, we will put it in. That was it, and it was not used that often, so it was a much smaller scale. We fixed the things that broke.
What happened to that money that we were using to do all this work before? It looks like we would have continued to have that money. Instead of just replacing it with the 2.1 million, we would have added the 2.1 to it. Now, why
We-
did past councils not continue to use the money that we're already using and use this stormwater money to really accelerate things? What we've done is taken that stormwater money and taken that other money back and put it somewhere else. I don't know why we got legal on here, because we already pay him. Why we have to, but anyway, I mean, that's, I guess he gets a cut in his department in the budget. I know each person contributes to all these different departments, but why would we have kept that money that we were already using and use the stormwater money and increase what we were doing? And I don't understand that. I know that we have a lot of money collected from water and sewer rates and all that sort of thing. That money ought to be going to water and sewer and doing these sort of things, I think, and not doing other things. Now, I don't understand that, but why we only got $400,000 going to these projects, and we've been doing them anyway. We ought to have 2.1 million going to those projects. I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me?
I'm old enough to remember all that, but yeah, we're doing more now than we used to do. Before, the stormwater was the forgotten utility. There wasn't any dedicated money for it. There was dedicated money for water and sewer and dedicated money for streets. There wasn't any dedicated money if a storm, I mean, the only thing we did really, we did some maintenance when we got around to it, and we fixed things that broke. So what we're doing today, we actually have crews that are dedicated to it. So there's a higher level. But also during the same period of time, the city was growing. Your fire department grew, your police department grew, your recreation department grew, the whole city grew. So exactly where all the dollars, it'd be interesting, you try to follow them all. But clearly what we're doing today, ever since we got into stormwater, is much more than what we used to do. What we used to do is little or nothing. I mean, it was just really only the things that...
Not $2.1 million worth of.
No. We're in a much better position, and if something happens, we're able to bring those dollars to bear. In fact, if necessary, we'll use general fund dollars again. If it were in the public right of way and we needed to do something, well, we would have to go ahead and do that.
I think that I think all that stormwater money ought to be going for stormwater projects, and we ought to somehow or another go back and find the money that was water and sewer money to do what we were doing before and add it. But that's just my opinion.
Mr. Pearson.
It's my 2 cents.
My two concerns are, we've heard it a couple times here already, the length of time that some of these projects have been on this list that are considered less important. Is that fair to say? But shouldn't they move up on that list as the years start ticking off? I mean, 9 years ago, the project may not have been important, but we're talking stormwater, so you're probably looking at erosion, all kinds of different things. After 9 years, it should be near the top of the list because it's been on there for 9 years. So that's my concern, is that the way we rank these projects, I understand there may be property at risk or even life at risk, and those have to take priority. But among these others, when something's been on here since 2006, you can't go back to that person and say, well, you're just not a priority right now. I mean, 6 years, the city's had 6 years to find this money to help this person out. So that's my first concern. We need to look at how we rank these projects. My second concern is the verbiage that you want to change from should to shall, or shall to should. What is it? Which one?
Should.
Shall to should. Okay, that could work both ways, couldn't it? Because we're saying 25% has to be dedicated to out of right-of-way. And a lot of these that have been on here for 9 years are out of right-of-way. Now we're saying, well, 25% should be. Okay, and then we start looking at the budget and we say, well, we've got a couple of really important ones here, so we're not gonna give 25% this year. So that person that was on the list for 9 years, because we changed shall to should, is gonna be on there for 10 years now. So I don't know that I like it working both ways.
Well, the way it's written now, it shall be no more than 25% didn't mean that it would be 25%. It can already be less than 25%, I think. So that problem is still there. It could be.
What
less
I'd
than
like to see, though,
25%.
what I'd like to see is a guaranteed portion of that budget go to out of right-of-way projects, so we know we're whittling down this list. I don't want any ambiguity on, well, we can put this much, or we don't have to put this much, or we might put this much. I want to say we are going to put that much.
You lock yourself into a specific percentage. then you have to do
Minimum
that.
percentage. If you want to do more, that's fine, but I think there should be a minimum set to that.
Are you saying that word ought to be will?
I don't know what the word
It
should
would be, will be at least X percentage, and that would be a threshold. That's
Right.
what you wanted to say.
Right, a threshold.
Will be at least X, whatever you think it
A
should be.
threshold is a good term.
Right. A floor.
Dr. Curley?
Todd, I agree with the intent of your thought, but the only question would be is if you pigeonhole the city into that, then if you have that emergency, then if, funds required, more monies to be spent to ameliorate that emergency, and you've sequestered 25% of your funds that cannot be spent for, an on right-of-way event, catastrophe, what have you, then I guess we would have to be looking at some other kind of budgetary allotment out of the general fund to handle that emergency. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you'd be right, but I'm okay with that, because if you have an emergency that exceeds your budget now, where does that money come from?
General
The general fund. So if you have an emergency that exceeds the 75% that you have remaining in that budget, I mean, because what's 25% of that budget? It's not astronomical. We're not talking about, millions and millions of dollars here. But we are talking about getting some of these
$525,000.
$525,000. But we are talking about getting some of these things off the list that have been on here for 9 years.
Mr. Mayor, just one point of order. If we could do the sign-up sheet and hear from any members of the public that have come to give input to this before council gets into a lot of deliberations, that would probably be more in order, but that's your discretion.
I'll acknowledge, Mr. Kimball, then I do have a silent. I got it right here.
Thank you,
You
George.
had your hand up.
A very quick question, Rusty. Kind of goes to some of the thought processes we've seen, or we've heard tonight from the other council members. Has this issue ever been brought up before? Because it's very clear that you indicate it's never been increased since its creation, but yet we know fuel for the various parts of equipment that are used on construction sites, the very salaries of our workers that are benefits of our workers, what legal fees cost. Where are we with that? Has this ever been broached before?
No, sir, this is the first time that we've discussed increasing the stormwater.
Thank you. That's all I have, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Barkley?
I've got some handouts here that my memory's not what it used to be, so I just decided to bring it in writing. And pass this around. Thank you. And you will notice these are minutes of earlier meetings when 2001. And Dr. Curlin was asking about emergencies. I do remember when the stormwater program started, they took money out of the general fund according to Danny Cruz. And then as they collected money, repaid the general fund. Now that's hearsay. I don't know if it's for a fact. That's what he told us back then. I just want you to notice the $25 that was charged to assign the utility to the tenant and the property owner, which is rather high. Then there was a typo error, 2560 instead of 2650. But I do want you to look at the very bottom paragraph, what Tidwell said about schools and churches, which I'm neither a teacher or a preacher and not trying to be. But I believe what Dr. Danny Crew told him was correct. They cannot be exempt. Nobody can be exempt from the way I read it. In fact, the city can be exempt. But you can put them in the same category as the house, I believe. $3.75 a month. But that's your prerogative. I just wanted to get that point cleared up. Because for some reason, Dr. Daniel Cruz said it, as if you had to charge them. That's your prerogative. If you want to charge them, all right. If you want to charge them $3.75, all right. I don't care. Now, Mr. McAteer remembers being on the county board, and once a year they had a budget session. And every time at budget session, all the school teachers show up. Everybody wants to raise, we got to do it for the children. They had a gentleman, I can't remember his name right now, but he came in one night. He was as righteous as a Baptist preacher revival meeting, and held up a paper. He says, "Pay for the children in Gaston County are below average." True statement. Think about it. He's right. But he got his money. And that's reminded me of what happened at the committee meeting. When the question came up about why do we measure houses, it costs too much to measure. It's not worth measuring. Well, if it's $25.60 or $26.50 makes no difference. Half of the houses are paying too much, and the other half are not paying enough. But yet, anybody else, the city can measure it. But your program does not measure retention basins. It only measures impervious surface. I always wondered about that. So, these are just some handouts of what happened in the past. Now, here's a good one on off right-of-way. And that's what reason I decided to come tonight when I heard them talking about off right-of-way. With as many engineers as you have on the payroll, they had to go to J&P. I've heard of all economic development. Well, J&P's bought a building up here on Main Street. I don't know how much business they planning on doing with the city gas company. Pay an outside engineering firm to design a drainage ditch, kind of expensive. I believe city staff could design a ditch on a, that all you got to do is see where the water flows. And they keep talking about drainage. Now, the way I understand it, it rains on the mountain, it rains in the valley. The people in the mountains are not worried about flooding. The people in the valley are. Talking about piping it, that causes more flooding in the valley. I haven't heard anybody say anything about retention basins. Are we going to build those? A developer building a subdivision, he's required to build retention basins. Well, apparently they're important for the developer, not for the city. So by all this piping, you may be creating more flooding and more problems for somebody in the future. It's just like the welfare system. This will cause more flooding that will cause them to come back to ask for another raise. Is that what you councilmen want? The reason I'm just giving you a heads up, because this is something you inherited from the previous council, and you have an opportunity tonight to just say no. If you won't do it, if you want to say go, go ahead and raise it. But it doesn't make much difference to me. But now that second paper that's gave you, turn over on the other side. See, it says, second thing you do is to have a checklist, check to see that you're on the right of way. So here is where your money is spent. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I have to look out after myself sometimes.
Just two of these.
Well, I didn't mean to put those. See, I have to bring these to remember what I'm going to talk about. I noticed on, on this page 10.1, on the background, you have decreased the stormwater-related issues. Well, this type of utility, unlike water and electrical, that's every month you're buying something, this is a utility which could put itself out of business. In other words, after 10 years, it looks like we would have less need for stormwater. But no, instead of less, staff tells us we need more. So where does it end? I don't know. I just wanted to give you something to think about tonight, because I've thought about it for years. I didn't like being gouged on that $25. And here's the last one. Your computer program that can do the impervious surface, which may or may not be correct. Here's a map of my property. That's all I know is how it affects me personally. Down on Bottonwood, the blue shows the city outfall line that empties out on me. I have got a natural flood retention basin. No, that's not taken into consideration. Not at all. I just provide. I didn't know I was providing a free service for the city. Anytime anybody wants to look at it, you're welcome to. Oh, and there was mention made of this 168, 314. I don't know if anybody wants to read it. If you do, I've got that too. Okay.
What is it? The enabling legislation.
The only advantage personally, paying more property tax instead of a utility, I can deduct property tax from the federal. You can't deduct utilities. And that goes for councilmen as well as myself. You know, this is kind of like what's happening in Washington. They want Congress to be under the same health plan. Well, I want my councilman not be able to deduct utilities like I can't deduct. And I think I've talked long enough, and you've been very patient. Thank you for your time. Have a good meeting.
Thank you, sir. I would, any questions?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
What are you referencing that the council gets to deduct their stormwater fee?
No, the individual does not get to deduct
Correct.
on federal income tax.
Right,
Well, I can't deduct it, you can't deduct it on yours.
right.
So
So
the same
we're
boat.
the same.
Right,
But if it was folded into property taxes, you could deduct that.
right. That's my point.
Okay. You lost me on that one because you were comparing us to something in Washington and
Well, I mean, in
Totally
Washington,
lost
they're talking about health care and putting Congress under the same health plan as everybody else. See, you're in the same boat with me.
right. So it's
Okay,
not comparable to healthcare, right?
No, not a bit.
Okay. Make sure I'm following you there.
Since this is a hearing, I would like to, I've had a request from Mr. Jeff Booker, Deputy Superintendent of the Gaston County Schools, that would like to speak, if you could, please. Mr. Booker?
Thank you, Mayor Brenchman, Honorable Councilman. We appreciate the service you give to our city every day. I am a resident of the city of Gastonia, and just wanted to speak to, as your staff has shown, we will bear a large brunt of the $400,000 increase. And any consideration that we give would help us. As you know, our budget stays under the same pressure your budget stays under. But we do appreciate the participation we've been given, and we also are appreciative, I understand from staff, that the credit for stormwater detention that we have developed on some of our sites will stay in place with this. And so we just appreciate any consideration you can give to help us, and again, thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Booker? Dr. Curley, excuse me.
Yes.
Pardon me, with regard to the school facilities, do you have some kind of an estimate of what percentage of the school facilities currently have retention or detention facilities on their properties?
No, sir, because a large percentage of our buildings are greater than 30 and 50 years of age. They have not had those, but as we have done additions or significant work, we have done, so for example, at Ashbrook Hospital, when we did that work, we've done it, and we enjoy a 40% credit for that.
Right, so Stuart Kramer has those in place.
Yes, Stuart Kramer has 3 different retention ponds.
Right, right. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Booker? Thank you, sir. Any? I'm ready to close the public hearing and
That motion would be in order, Mr. Mayor, unless council feels they're going to need to ask a question of somebody. If they do, then you have to reopen the public hearing and bring them back up to the
I
podium.
can leave it open if it.
Yeah.
Let's, okay. Any discussion, or does anyone care to make a motion?
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we close the public hearing and approve the staff recommendations as listed on Exhibit 10-4 to include the fee increase and the resolution as listed below.
Second.
Any questions on that motion?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Gallagher and then Mr.
The one question I have is, Todd, I like how you brought up that we should have at least minimum 25% of the stormwater projects listed to be, at least the minimum. That's the one verbiage I like to see instead of should and shall being changed. So if you consider that, Dr. Gerlin, to amend your motion to that regard.
I think we can,
You could vote on his, and then you can bring a motion to do the ordinance, because Dr. Curlin's motion included basically the resolution, and we need a separate motion on the ordinance, which is on 10-6, so we can do that next.
so,
The
Right,
ordinance
you're,
is-
so what I'll do is I'll amend the motion just to include the fee increase. Just to
Resolution.
consider, yes, we'll have the fee increase first, and we can have a second motion in which we can discuss the verbiage as was just mentioned, okay?
that's what I thought I was seconding, was the resolution on the fee, so I'm glad we clarified that.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
that's-
No,
that's the way-
I snuck that in on you, sorry, Todd. So we're gonna go ahead and just, if that's
That's the way this
with
is.
the approval of the council,
in the-
just the fee increase.
Right here in the agenda. Brenda?
Just one question for clarification. This fee increase would go into effect July 1st, 2014. Maybe I'm wrong, but was there some conversation that this would go into effect when we had our budget sessions or our committee meeting, January 2014?
Yes.
Help me understand that.
Your memory's perfect. When we were talking in September, we were talking about doing this in January. Some of the information that we got from the county, from the schools, talked about the impact on them because they are in the same fiscal year that we are, and that if we gave them an extended time, at least that allows the county and the schools to budget for this. So that as some county commissioners and school board folks talked about that, we thought that was reasonable so we recommended that would work well for them, and we thought it was a good idea.
So that has no impact on our current budget whatsoever?
No, because our budget's balanced on what we have now. This is only moving forward.
And one thing, I'll save that for the next motion. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
This fee raises us up to be the same as Belmont's, is that correct?
A little bit
Correct.
higher, I believe. Is it the same?
Yes.
Thought we were a little higher.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah, we're same as Belmont.
Okay. Anybody else? Your motion, the first one, your motion, Dr. Curlin, is to, as the recommendation says, is to raise the, okay? All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, please. Okay, all opposed? Thank you. Now, we're still in session. Item number 2.
Oh, you want me to make the motion?
I'll make the motion that we
I'm
change the
sorry. You do it.
verbiage to at least the minimum amount, 25% being the minimum amount of the projects listed to be completed.
So,
Per year.
Councilman Gallagher, if I can assist,
sir.
that'll be, and will be at least 25% of the annual capital project budget. That's how that'll read.
Yes.
Project
All right.
budget.
Be at least, say it again.
Will be at least 25%.
For the capital funding to be allocated to the off-right of way projects.
What's deleted will be the words "shall be no more than."
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay, discussion? Yes, ma'am? Yes, sir.
Just as information, and Dr. Curlin had mentioned about the flexibility with changing that wording a little bit. I see that as what we do when we need additional funds for the insurance claims we have to transfer from the general fund. Would this be the same type thing if we had a catastrophe or something that we would have to transfer money, although we were using at least 25% on the off right-of-ways?
Yes, if this is passed this way, it'll be 25% will be reserved for off right-of-way. Should something happen of a catastrophic nature,
Right.
and we would need to adjust that, something unusual, we'd just bring it back to City Council to see if the council would agree to make that exception.
So it would come back to the council for transferring funds?
Correct. The way it was set up before, as you can see, was what it was saying, you couldn't exceed it. And the problem that we were having is sometimes they were big projects, and we actually have exceeded in a couple of years, where if you go off right away, it could get expensive, and then all of a sudden in one given year, you could exceed it. Now, the next year, you might not. So we were just looking for the flexibility. But we can work with this, and if there's a year where that's causing a problem, then we'll just come right back to you folks and explain the situation.
I have a question. It's not about that particular verbiage, but it's about something else in the stormwater. Would you rather me just ask that after we vote on this? So I don't confuse the issue?
Yeah, let's go ahead and vote.
So what I'm hearing you say, Mr. Munn, is that if there was a concern, an exception, okay, that rather than actually maintain what this wording suggests, which is the at least 25%, that this could be considered an exception if so needed, as compared to requesting additional funds through the general fund balance, for instance. You're saying, actually, I want to get
Okay.
this straight, because, you know, what this suggests is that it's at least and there's no exceptions.
Yeah.
But-
You know, staff just wanted to have it flexible, because some years you might be doing a little more, you know, off right-of-way, next, other years you'd be doing more on right-of-way. And technically, if you had a lot of serious problems on right-of-way, that's our liability, and that's usually involving a street failure or something like that, so we really kind of have to do that. We would then have a choice, the city would have a choice, we would all have a choice. What we could do is go to the stormwater fund and adjust this so we could push more money to on right-of-way, or we could go to, say, the general fund and use the money there. You know, because we usually don't have much of a fund balance in stormwater. You might have a little bit there. But is that, so,
I understand what you're saying. It's just a question whether council likes that approach. So,
yeah, I mean, you know, we wrote it because we wanted to have the flexibility, because it goes back and forth, but I can appreciate what city council's saying, is you want to just make sure that at least it's that way. The way it was written before, it wasn't allowed to be any more than that. So we're, you know, and 25% has kind of been the rule of thumb that we've been using, and that's fine. I think we can go forward with it. And you know, if we go forward in the next year and it's not workable, then we'll just bring it back and explain to you why it's not working.
Okay. Yes, sir.
And I know that we had a conversation about this. In fact, we did have some catastrophic failures due to the extensive rain we had during the, I guess, late spring, early summer months, that really brings rise to what you're talking about as far as some of your on-roadway incidents, correct?
Yes, correct. You get a lot of rain like that, one right after the other. You know, the soil's wet, it's pushing, and then you get separation, and then you start to have the failures. Sure.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay. Now I'm lost. We've gotten to the discussion. Oh, okay. All in favor of the motion? All opposed? All right. Both of those for unanimous. Thank you.
I got it.
Mayor, would it be?
You had, go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I was gonna
You
ask if
get
it'd be appropriate to ask a question now while
Sure.
we're on the subject.
Yes, sir.
I noticed, in some of our many handouts here, and I did wonder about this, and I'm hoping maybe the city manager can just explain it to me, 'cause I'm not really following it. What is the $25 assignment fee for?
$25.
What he's referring to there.
It says the primary change is to allow property owners to assign their stormwater utility fee. And this is minutes from a previous council meeting. It says the determination was made that they would look at those locations that would typically want to have the property owner give the assignment to tenants.
I think Mr. Bombardier is going to be able to answer the question.
I'm just not, does this mean like if a shopping center, or does this apply to residential landlords? Can you just, if you have somebody renting your property?
That was primarily set up, the property owner is responsible for the bill legally. But that was set up as an administrative fee simply to handle the paperwork if an owner, say in a rental residential property, wanted to assign that to the tenant where they're paying all the other utilities. They could come in, fill out the appropriate paperwork. We would change the billing system to bill that tenant. Strictly an administrative fee to process paperwork. That's all it was.
And is the $25 just for the stormwater, or it applies to all utilities? It's just a $25?
That was just for the stormwater, because again, stormwater is billed to the owner of record in the Gaston County tax records. That's the records we have. And if they wanted to change that, whereas your normal utilities, water, sewer, electric, typically you come to City Hall or you call and you set it up in your name. We don't necessarily know when a tenant, in some cases, may be in a particular property. That's why we would bill the owner stormwater unless it's changed.
Gotcha. Makes perfect sense. Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you very much. Okay, come out of public hearing then.